Let's Count's an early years maths program for 3 to 5-year-olds. It was designed by Professor Bob Perry, Associate Professor Anne Gervasoni and the Smith family back in 2009. What it does is it assists early years professionals to work in partnership with parents and families to promote positive mathematical experiences for young children. It fosters opportunities for young children to engage in the maths that they see around them, to notice, explore and talk about it in relevant ways, and that it's fun for them. So where we started was that, we looked at Let's Count and we realised, it was developed back in 2009. And since then, there's been lots of research and learnings in the early childhood learning space, in the early childhood maths space, in the cultural space, in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge space. And we realised that, we needed to have a look at Let's Count to see that it was actually, incorporating the latest research and the latest thinking and so forth, and reflect also, the changes in families and communities. And so when we started, we knew we needed some expertise here. So, and we decided to partner with Peridot Education, who have been involved with Let's Count for years, and Stronger Smarter Institute, who have been involved with the Smith family for quite a number of years. And we partnered with them because we knew that they had the expertise to help us do the revision. And what we started off with a workshop, brought everybody together, the team, around, how we were going to work together, how were we going to create a culturally safe space for everybody to be able to voice their opinions and, and be happy to, be comfortable in voicing their opinions and so forth. And we succeeded really well. So that workshop really set us up in the beginning. And then we planned out the timeline and the work. So we started off with a literature review, which looked at early childhood learning, early childhood maths learning, Indigenous knowledges in maths. Stronger Smarter wrote a whole piece around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges and in maths, in early learning and maths knowledges, which got incorporated into the literature review. And so the principals then set the standards for us to then revise the materials. And one of the new pieces we brought in was an introductory activity where which we haven't got at the moment. It will set the scene for training and the context in which the practitioners or the early childhood educators, the families, the children, the parents, the communities where we're actually delivering the training, because all communities are different, all families are different and so forth. So we're hoping that the training will be more based around the experiences and the context of the communities in which we're delivering that training. What the funding allowed us to do was to actually invest in the processes. It allowed us to partner with Peridot Education and Stronger Smarter, and gave us all the time to do really thorough research, to explore, to question, to consult and so forth. And it allowed us to create a safe space in which to question and resolve differences. And, and there were differences, we did have differences of opinion and so forth, but having that time and be able to create that safe space for everybody to voice their opinions really helped in actually having a really robust and really thorough process that we went through. It was through the common values of all the team, but also through the ethos of which Stronger Smarter actually work. And, this then came through on the revision, to make sure that we're creating culturally safe spaces for our families, our communities, and, inclusivity, and also, including learning for all, because Australia's got so many cultures, that, it's about learning, and also our other cultures learning about our First Nations people's cultures. So.
It's been important that throughout the history of Let's Count, it's been about enjoyment. It's been about recognising that children and families are already engaging in mathematics and that can be a really, really enjoyable exercise. So I think the revised Let's Count builds on that initial enthusiasm and encouragement and that real great sense of enjoyment that can come from just engaging parents, children, educators, parents, children, just engaging around mathematics. So if anything, I think the revised program builds on the very strong essence of enjoyment that's already been in the Let's Count program to date.
And of course, one of the ways in which you will enjoy anything is to become engaged with it, to become successful with it, and to really get stuck into something which interests you. And so with Let's Count, we're working very hard to make sure that the mathematics that the children do, that the mathematics that the families interact with their children about is everyday mathematics. So, for example, you might be cooking a cake, or frying some eggs, or any of those sorts of things, and you can bring in a myriad of different mathematical ideas. Clearly, there's counting and there's weighing and there's measuring of all sorts that could be there, but there's more subtle things like the time it takes to do things, how you measure that time, how you talk about how long it takes to do something and how long something is. Two different measures, but the same sort of language.
This is not about teaching children or families mathematics. It's about looking around what you already do and recognising the mathematics in it. So it's not about teaching kids, like Bob said, to do sums, or it's not necessarily about sitting down and doing formal mathematics. It's about recognising the mathematics in many, many things. And I think one of the things that often people who've talked about their involvement in Let's Count have highlighted is that it's beyond counting. It's recognising that mathematics is not just sitting and writing or working with numbers, but there's a whole range of other things like measuring, like space, like time, a whole range of things that we engage in every day.
I think what really excites me about the revised Let's Count is that it centralises children's enjoyment, children's fun, and children's own agency in doing their own mathematics. So one of the things that the revised program does is helps children notice the mathematics that they're doing, notice the mathematics in their lives, and then that makes mathematics then relevant to them. And so later on, when they're being told that they're doing mathematics, perhaps in kindergarten or in a school or wherever, they will say, hey, this is something that I really enjoy doing. We say in Let's Count that everyone is a powerful mathematician. And we believe that very much. And that's one of the principles on which we base the program.
We're really talking about dispositions. So we're talking about learning outcomes that are about positive dispositions about mathematics. They're about building the belief in children and among families that they are competent and powerful mathematicians. That's something that's often missing from a lot of adult lives. When you talk to lots of adults, they say they'd shy away from mathematics because it was difficult and they were no good at it. If we can engage with children and families in everyday situations in ways that promote those positive dispositions, then like Bob said, kids and families are much more likely to engage in mathematics and to position themselves as people who can engage in mathematics, not something that where they put up a barrier and say, oh no, it's maths, I can't do it. So I think in terms of learning outcomes, dispositions are often not as measurable as sort of facts and figures, but they're incredibly powerful because those dispositions impact on the ways in which all of us engage in future experiences. One of the principles of Let's Count is about recognising strengths. And it's not about saying to families, hey, look, you're a bad parent because you don't know mathematics. It's about saying to families, you are engaging in mathematics. You are working with your kids in mathematics. So of course you have some strengths in mathematics. We just need to tell you about them and help you to recognise them so you can talk about them more with your kids in the future.
I think the other really important outcome has to do with language. the mantra for Let's Count, notice, explore, and talk about, that last talk about is really, really important. The other bits are important too, but one of the things that we've noticed when we've been talking with parents who have been undertaking and being involved in Let's Count is that they don't necessarily talk about mathematics to their children. Many of them talk to their children about all sorts of things, but not necessarily about mathematics. And if we can ask them then just to notice what they're doing, notice the mathematics that they're doing, play with it, the exploration, and then talk about, while they're playing with their child and their mathematics, talk about what's happening, is that there's going to be mathematics in whatever language you happen to be involved with. There's going to be mathematics in whatever activities you're involved with.
Let's Count's got a great opportunity to contribute to the agency of First Nations students and families by providing a culturally responsive learning resource in the early years that enables families and students to see their identities and their cultures reflected in the materials and the processes, and gives the educators creates a safe space for the educators to be confident in delivering the project and the program in the centre, but also doing it in a way that's going to be engaging for a broad range of families. By being more culturally responsive, Let's Count's able to reach much more students and in turn give much more opportunities for families to recognise, to notice, to explore and talk about numeracy in their settings. And that's really about then shifting those experiences of numeracy in the early years for not only the students, but shifting it for the families as well, to really celebrate and enjoy mathematics and what the different ways we can apply numeracy thinking in our context at home or at work or at school or in the community, and recognising that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, or recognising that First Nations Australians have really rich mathematical traditions and understandings of different mathematical concepts, and how we can create a safer third space between First Nations Australians thinking and Western constructs of mathematics allows for greater inclusivity in early years numeracy and greater enjoyment of learning and putting kids on the right track to become lifelong learners. Look, I think it goes beyond just having different examples and contexts. What it probably looks at is recognising that we're all, as humans, bring our own experience of the world and how we've experienced the world, and we're able to celebrate positive experiences of mathematics and how that it may be slightly different to maths as we've grown to understand it in across different areas. So, and that's thinking about, then we start thinking about how we perceive mathematics and how we experience mathematics. That can then highlight a range of different contexts that you may be able to celebrate the strengths. So, for example, if young people have grown up not so much thinking about adding and subtracting and counting and in sort of different models of ownership and sharing and relating, so there's been different elements of mathematics may have been discussed at an early stage for different families. So you might think it's really important to count along a number line and count backwards, and for the cultural norm might be in other cultures to talk about how we relate to each other, so who your relations are and what relationships are brought in. So what we see is that we've got one child who may have grown up with being introduced to more concepts around number, and then we've got another child who's grown up being introduced to more concepts around pattern thinking, and understanding that we don't have to start at, you must do count from 1 to 10 to move on to the next thing. Recognizing that our children all come to their learning journey with different starting points and different strengths around how they learn and what they've experienced. And then what we've got to do is build the confidence and support the educators to be able to recognise those strengths and to really celebrate and continue to build upon them. Really important that First Nations perspectives and knowledges and processes are able to be built in and around different learning opportunities that kids face in their day-to-day lives. And this helps families and students to be able to see their cultures and their identities reflected in the learning materials and the learning processes of that are regular for them. Starting from a strength base and recognising that First Nations communities have long and enduring histories with mathematical concepts and are able to apply numeracy and mathematical thinking in a whole range of different contexts, is celebrating the strengths that our young ones and our families walk into their centres with, and giving educators a tool that allows them to recognise that strength and then celebrate it and build upon for other learning in the early years. Numeracy Space is something that's was really important as a part of the review process, and I think has come through really strongly in the principles of the project and how the materials continue to be developed and adapted to respond to a grade as well, because by increasing understanding and respect for First Nations knowledges and communities and processes, we're able to contribute to improving the reconciliation agenda and improving outcomes for First Nations Australians, and creating a program that responds to that and takes that into account. We're hoping to engage a lot more students, a lot more families, and a lot more educators with a program that has been proven to shift the outcomes for early years numeracy, but for even more and more people.